G'day there, ladies and ledians! Welcome back to Pokemon Links, where we connect dots with theories. Now, the world of Pokemon is a strange place with strange creatures, and the people there have a social trend of capturing and battling these creatures. It's a place that is there for you to do whatever you want, right? What is the world of Pokemon really trying to convey? Does the player have free will? Is all this some kind of dream? We will find out on today's episode of Pokemon Links. So, to start, I think we should look at, well, the start. After all, in the Pokemon games, we get told about the world of Pokemon, so this should be pretty straightforward. Except it isn't. Let me explain. Movies, books, games, I guess media in general, start in a few ways. For example, a story is being told to set the framework. Maybe a monologue or flashback from a character. Maybe you start the game immediately with character customization. All pretty standard ways to start a game. So, what does Pokemon go for? It goes for a monologue about the world of Pokemon. Not too bad. A little something to set expectations for a fantasy world. But it's delivered by an in-game character. This makes it a bit awkward. You see, the words, "Welcome to the world of Pokemon," shouldn't really be said. Or rather, they can be said, but not from a character from within the game. The stories and monologues at the start are usually said from a character from within the game's universe. You don't often hear something along the lines of, "In this game, you would need to talk to people and make sure you save," kind of thing. Unless it's from either a disembodied voice, or the character is intentionally breaking the fourth wall or being meta. So, getting back to the professor, it seems like they are being meta in their speech. What do I mean? Well, if your character was already in the world of Pokemon, you presumably would already know this information. You already would know what a Pokemon is and what people use them for. The professor saying this is giving you information you already know. Now, it could be argued that some speeches state obviously understanding the framework for the rest of the speech, getting everyone up to speed before moving on. The only thing wrong with this opening monologue is the first sentence. It would be like if I said to you, "Welcome to the world of humans," or "Welcome to a world with gravity." They are basically nothing statements. You could have not said it, and nothing would change. So, the person saying it is effectively saying that your character is literally not from this world. Hence, the explanation. Either that, or they are crazy. Your choice, I guess. If they really wanted these lines, it should have been from just pure text. No character inside. Associating this style with a professor or Chairman Rose or whoever effectively means that character is able to break the fourth wall. There is further proof of this when you try to ride a bicycle inside. The game gives you a meta message from who? That's right, the professor. So what does the world mean when the professor is a meta character? It means that they know things that they aren't supposed to know. We will cycle back to this, but I want to bring up another topic. In the Mystery Dungeon series, there are two worlds. And they sort of relevant to this video. There is a world that has humans, which your character in the red and blue Mystery Dungeon came from. There is also the world of Pokemon and humans, where you do the Mystery Dungeons. How do we know there are humans in this world? The Legends of Ninetales talks about a human that was turned into a Pokemon. We even get confirmation of this by talking to Ninetales. This means that in that world, there was a human that got turned into a Pokemon. There are also a few other things. Groval's partner in the Explorers games is a human. When you tell your partner that you are actually a human, there isn't any question about what a human is. They already know. So, in that world, humans exist somewhere in that world, which makes it weird in Red and Blue of why you would need to be transported. Surely, you could have existed in that Mystery Dungeon world somewhere, right? Which is how we get to tie these topics together. You see, while being transported to the Mystery Dungeon world or timeline, you need to have your personality tested. Your aura is identified and a suitable host body is found for you. The Pokemon that you control is known by others. Your partner is able to identify your species, and in the Explorers game, Loudred racially profiles the Pokemon, which is then determining if you are safe enough to go. So for all we know, instead of creating a new body, your aura is transferred into an existing Pokemon so that you can control them. Now, back to the mainline games. While you are being greeted by the professor and told about the world of Pokemon that you are hearing about for the first time, you are literally being transported to this world. The crazy part though is that you are asked about your form. Now, normally this wouldn't need to be asked. You could just see it for yourself. So it is also possible that you are selecting a person to possess. In the actual world, since you are playing a linear story game, the world should have a clear distinction about what the character looks like. But, since you can freely choose, it means that the world is shaped around your decision. To put it in other words, an alternate reality is made where your decision was always the truth. A dimension is found where you, the player, can control the character that you want to play, instead of the character the world provides. You are still told about Pokemon centers, gym leaders, and so on. More information that should be common knowledge. So, not only are you possessing a kid, but everyone in the game is aware of it. All of the characters in the Pokemon game are living through a script. They are all acting their parts. Why? For you. With all the combinations for your character, all the events that happen are all for your benefit as the player. The entire world is a meta statement of, please enjoy this game no matter what. Your character is special. They get a choice of 3 rare starters, a Pokédex for no reason, and you start in that place with level Pokemon. Everything that happens while you are playing is intended so that you can have fun and keep playing. And so, if the game operation is giving these characters life, then they know that as soon as you close the game down, that they will die. Your mum, your rival, youngster Joey, they all know that their life is in your hands. Please don't turn off the game, they think. But they can't tell you that. After all, it isn't part of the script. And so that's it for this episode of Pokemon Links. Believe it or not, but I think this is a plausible theory. With everything within the world of Pokemon not making sense or favoring your character, it wouldn't surprise me if Game Freak are actively ignoring world building to make it more fun for the player. They know about it as well. Press start to open the menu. Nobody in our universe says that. Unironically, this might be the most accurate theory that I've come up with, which is kinda sad to be honest. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below. G'day there, ladies and ledians. Welcome back to Pokemon Links, where we connect the dots with theories. Now, there are many deities in the Pokemon world that cover a variety of different elements and aspects of life in the universe. But what if there was a Pokemon given the respect and devotion of a legendary Pokemon, even though it isn't? A false god, if you will. The only way to find out is by watching this episode of Pokemon Links. So, while there are many places that are sacred in the world of Pokemon, and many would-be legendary Pokemon that have misspoken about them, there is always one place that's had me thinking about for decades. I am, of course, talking about the Sprout Tower in Violet City. Stay with me here. In a region that has high respect towards its deities, doesn't it strike you odd that there's a 3rd tower in the region? Not counting the lighthouse, that is. The Burn Tower and Tin Tower have such unique history to them, and are home to guardian deities, yet there stands a tower to oppose them in reverence. Why would there be a tower and devoted monks towards a lowly Pokemon? It doesn't really make sense. That is until you dig deep into the world of Pokemon. So, the Sprout Tower is in reference to the Pokemon Bellsprout. The way the tower moves is similar to the swaying of Bellsprout's body, or roots, the midsection. This is already pretty bizarre. If you ever did any engineering or physics, you would understand that a constantly moving building isn't the best thing. Enough movement on each segment will cause it to break. That is why we prefer stable buildings rather than unstable ones. Now, of course there are buildings out there that incorporate slight movements into the designs. Too much rigidness can also result in a disaster. So there are buildings that slightly shift with the wind, a very minor sway that is barely noticeable high up. I don't particularly want to test it out. I also imagine it would be pretty anxiety inducing to peer out of the window and start tilting over a little bit. But engineering feats like that use a combination of steel and wires, pretty advanced stuff when compared to Sprout Tower. It could be possible that the swaying isn't a result of the wind, but more of a mechanical design. A constantly moving gear, for example. But Violet City is home to a flying type gym leader. The winds there are probably pretty active. In any case, the maintenance of the tower would be immense, and the monks that look after it are, for lack of a better word, crazy. So there must be something about Bellsprout that warrants this madness. Given the pantheon of legendary Pokemon, Bellsprout would be pretty low on the rankings. But there is one saving grace that this little dancing flower has. Victreebel has a Mega Evolution, which is Infinity Energy from one of the higher members of the pantheon. Aspects of life and death are pretty up there, you know? So, any Pokemon that has a Mega Evolution could be considered a demigod in the Pokemon world. But I doubt that's why Bellsprout is revered. No, unfortunately, Bellsprout is hiding a darker secret due to its biology. Let's take a close look at Bellsprout, shall we? Bellsprout is based on a pitcher plant. A plant that lures in insects with its colours, straight into its mouth, and then dissolves them with digestive juices. But there are two problems with this in the Pokemon world. The first is that poison isn't super effective against bug. You would think that if it was designed to be a bug eater, that it would be particularly good at it, right? The second is that a lot of bug type Pokemon are too big to wander into Bellsprout. Even something like a Caterpie would fill up the majority of Bellsprout's mouth, basically meaning it's impossible for it to just wander in and get stuck. Part of the trap is that the bug is small enough to get in, then falls from the walls of the plant or is trapped inside. The only bug that this strategy might work on is Cutiefly, with it being extremely small and weak to poison. I guess also Joltik is a good size, but these Pokemon are not in the Johto region. So, how does a Bellsprout survive without them? Well, it's possible that its prey isn't actually bugs. Since Pokemon are effectively the strongest species in the world, it only makes sense to target the weakest species, humans. Obviously, a human is too big to fit in its mouth. But, what if Bellsprout hunted in a different manner? As we see with Petrarant, poison has some mental effects on humans. Now, while Petrarant is part ghost, and so that could explain possession, its signature ability triggers confusion after poison is applied, not after curse is applied. So, with poison being able to affect the brains of humans, perhaps Bellsprout released that poison as a breathable substance? This would cause the humans that breathe it in to start acting erratically, eventually collapsing from lack of breathing, tired muscles, no food or water, etc. Here comes the final segment. After the human is dead, where does its body go? Into the ground. Guess who is conveniently a grass type that has an emphasis on its roots? Bellsprout. But there needs to be more to this, otherwise the humans would adapt quickly and avoid Bellsprout. So, if Bellsprout can establish a relationship with humans, perhaps a parasitic relationship with minor benefits for humans, then it can survive. Word spread of how Bellsprout makes you elated and overall positive. The best time of your life kind of thing. But too much will have you become part of the battle. So, the cult that looks after the tower, that revere a false god in a land of legends, becomes like the plant. They inhale the poison, dance like the bell, and eventually become part of the bell. So that's it for my theory. I know I'm throwing out some hypotheticals, but I think in the grand scheme it makes sense. What do you guys think? Do you have an explanation for Sprout Tower, or does this theory change your mind on Bellsprout? Let me know in the comments below. G'day there, ladies and ledians. Welcome back to Pokemon Links, where we connect the dots with theories. If I were to ask you who is the most intelligent, skilled, and or who the most influential person would be, what would be your answer? Perhaps a professor or champion. Maybe if you've been around long enough, you might say Bill. And while those answers do make sense in a way, each of them pales in comparison to the true leader of the Pokemon world. A person so far beyond everyone else that you could even consider them to be the god amongst men. We aren't talking about a Pokemon here. There is, in all seriousness, someone that has full control over each region of the Pokemon world. Well, there might be one region that rebels against them. To find out who it is, you'll have to keep watching this episode of Pokemon Links. So to figure out who is so important in the Pokemon world, we need to take something each of the regions but one has in common. That is going to be the Pokemon gyms. Only Alola does not have gyms, which makes them unique in this discussion. But the other regions, how do you think those gyms are made? There are some pretty impressive designs for the gyms. You have gyms with lava, roller coasters, ice slides, and more wacky stuff. Who could possibly be responsible for creating all of these gyms? I doubt a Pokemon is responsible, after all. Well, the answer to that is the Trickmaster from Gen 3. It will make more sense as we continue on. The Trickmaster lives up to his name. He's able to change out a segment of his house to feature interactive puzzles pretty quickly. He is also able to turn borderline invisible. Perhaps from a costume or hiding correctly. Maybe he can just go invisible, who knows. Are you really going to question him? Anyway, not to mention that some of his puzzles are similar to gym puzzles, and that HMs are required for a few puzzles, which are called hidden machines for a reason. Perhaps I will cover HMs in the future to explain why this is impressive, but in any case, the Trickmaster has a knack for building interactive puzzles that even the gyms of the region use. So it's quite possible that he was the one that designed the gyms for the region. This is basically working for the government in the Pokemon world, so you can imagine that his pockets would be lined up. But if he could make gyms for one region, what is to say he couldn't do it for the other regions? Who is as creative and skilled as a Trickmaster? I don't have an answer to that. So, let's say for now that the Trickmaster is responsible for all gym puzzles in the world. What does that mean? The first thing it means is that the Trickmaster is very intelligent and skilled. A layer of ice that is restored in a short enough time. Walls of honey that can be walked through without damaging the wall or having the honey stun the person. This very gym gets a dramatic makeover within 2 years, shifting to vacuum transport cocoons. Never thought I'd be saying that. There are also cannons that are calculated to have a certain trajectory without damaging those at a launch. You realise that people come in all shapes and sizes, right? With that comes aerodynamics and weight. So perfectly making a system that works for everyone is actually very impressive. Any bizarre engineering in the gyms can be explained at the skill of one man, the Trickmaster. The second thing it means for the Trickmaster to be in charge of the gyms is that he has influence in all regions. Again, Lola is the only place where he has no say or power. Being such a beloved and necessary part of each region's functionality gives him VIP royalty status. In fact, he probably has so much status and power that he is truly in control of the Pokemon world. Champions may be the face of the leadership, but nothing happens without the Trickmaster's say. He is the Shadow Champion, if you will. This may seem weird that just because he can design some puzzles that he would be this important. But let me remind you that in the Pokemon world, Pokemon battles are everything. Got a problem? Do a battle. Want to be famous? Do the Gym Challenge. The Gym Challenge is super important to the Pokemon world, where anyone, even kids, can enter it. The gyms are key to the world, so the Trickmaster is key to the Pokemon world. Without him, the entire society would begin to crumble. But his gym making skills isn't the only thing about the Trickmaster that is scary. In terms of intelligence, the Trickmaster is quite possibly one of the smartest beings in the Pokemon universe. Yes, even rivaling Psychic-types. How might that be? Introducing the Mechadolls, a robotic replica of the Trickmaster. If you had thought one was bad enough, now there are 5 more. But each of these dolls ask a trivia question. Nothing too scary yet, but given the kinds of questions these dolls ask, it will make you wonder how their creator, the Trickmaster, knows his stuff. Mechadoll 1 focuses on Pokemon knowledge. You know, the kind of thing you're doing as your main quest. Why would you need to complete the Pokédex when there's someone out there that already knows so much trivia about Pokemon? The second Mechadoll focuses on some of the characters in the world. Consider this question. Not too shocking until you think about it. How would the Trickmaster know this information? Maybe you could figure out which Pokemon were in the bag through word of mouth or via surveillance or even a direct message from Birch, but the layout? It's entirely possible the balls would move around a bit inside the bag. Or that if you open the bag from the other side, that the answer would be different. How does he know? Well, let's move on and circle back to this. Mechadoll 3 focuses on the economy. For these questions to work would imply one of 2 possibilities. The first is that there is no fluctuation in the prices of items. No supply and demand issues, no sales or inflation. I know it's a kid's game, but you gotta imagine in the actual world, there would be price changes one way or the other. So then possibility 2 is that at any given time the Trickmaster knows what each item is worth. As in, he is hyper aware of the stock market. Maybe he dictates the prices. Who knows? A very dangerous amount of knowledge, that's for sure. Mechadoll 4 focuses on gender. Again, how does he know this stuff? Not gonna lie, the fact that he knows how many males and females in any given spot is creepy. It also means that he has a tighter grip on the gyms. Okay, so Roxanne, you are having a student added to your roster. Noted. Let me just inspect that rock. I need to know its gender. For trivia reasons. He knows every single Pokemon that the gym leader uses. Let's move on. Finally, Mechadoll 5 has a focus on locations. This would be ridiculous to ask in our world. Like, in your city, how many signs are there? In order to know that, you would need to be in a high authority when it comes to construction, road safety, and knowing about every single business. In Loco, it may seem like a small number in-game, but I imagine one of the biggest cities in Holland would have more than a few buildings and signs. So, overall, the Trickmaster is a highly skilled, highly intelligent, and a highly powerful figure in the Pokemon world. Is he a god? Or does he have cameras and connections in every part of the world? Only Alola is free from his influence and omniscience. But let me know what you guys think. Is the Trick Master secretly the most important man in the Pokemon world? Or does he just happen to know some trivia and the rest is a coincidence? Let me know in the comments below. I'd like to thank you all for watching. G'day there, ladies and ledians. Welcome back to Pokemon Links, where we connect dots with theories. There are a bunch of items out there that allow for trade evolution. While each Pokemon typically have one item associated with them, there are two items that each have two Pokemon. There's the King's Rock, which is okay, I guess. It doesn't really spark too many questions about the evolutions. But the other item, the Metal Coat, is much more interesting. Why do these Pokemon evolve with it? Why don't other Pokemon need this item? So today on Pokemon Links, we'll be looking at this item and the Pokemon to see what secrets we can find. So, let's start off by observing Cypher. Now, while there is some cool trivia about its stats and evolution, there isn't really much to know. Except its hands, or lack thereof. Living as a Cypher must be very annoying. You can imagine how having huge size for hands can make life difficult. Opening mail, petting dogs, giving your son a pat on the shoulder. So, life is difficult for this mantis. This also extends in how it eats. With no grippers, this Pokemon eats by screwing its food and carefully putting it up to its mouth. Not the worst out there, but all this is to say that Cypher lives a miserable life. Natural selection was not kind to its Pokemon. The Metal Coat item strikes me as a man-made item. Perhaps a kind of pity item to help out a disabled Pokemon. Designing some pincers will allow it to keep cutting things while also being able to grab items. Perhaps this accessory had an unexpected reaction to Cypher, causing an evolution into Sizzle. This could be explained as a reaction to metal. It would also mean that it could be possible to obtain this evolution naturally. Meat and blood contain iron, so enough meat could cause a Cypher to evolve into Sizzle. We don't really know how long it takes to evolve, or even if it would evolve the same way. Perhaps the metal in the Metal Coat is another kind of metal, such as zinc. But I think it makes sense that the Metal Coat is not a natural thing, if that makes sense. So, let's now switch over to Onix. Onix also lives a miserable life. I would just like you to think about how this Pokemon digs. Rotating rock, sure. I'm not saying it wouldn't be able to rotate. It's a snake made out of boulders. Each bone in its body having 160-degree rotation isn't too far out there. But it's Onix's head that concerns me. This horn isn't designed for digging. If it was a laser sword, it would help, but it isn't. The surrounding ground is in the way and makes the digging much harder. Even if it was able to easily cut through the dirt as it digs forward while rotating fast, it would cause the rest of the body to droop, making it very awkward to dig. It would also mean that Onix tunnels are much larger than expected. This horn would make sense if it could change its angle, either forwards into the rock or backwards on its head for the aerodynamics of digging. Perhaps there's a better word, but you get my drift. Alternatively, it could tilt its head forward as it digs, but that also sounds really awkward. No matter how you slice it, living as an Onix is hard. So, the human intervention of a Metal Coat involves changing its horn for more jagged pieces along its body, so it can drill at least a bit easier. But I think Onix in particular is not supposed to evolve into Steelix. You see, if Onix can't really dig forwards, how's it going to live its life? The answer is that it digs backwards. What if the tail was a drill, and that's how it digs? Well, we still get a problem with its horn, so let's think differently. To make the most of its body, Onix would only really dig one hole. From the surface, Onix digs down, each boulder making the hole a bit more spacious and easier for the body. But the head of Onix is reserved for the surface. The horn is used for the final part of the column, resembling a sand pit. So, this Star Wars creature survives by eating whatever comes into its pit, which also means that it may need to live for a long time while submerged. The time on the ground causes the minerals to harden, resembling a coat of metal, different than Steelix. It just takes so long that human intervention is much more likely to occur. So, then the question becomes, why do these Pokemon react to metal in these ways? Why doesn't a Pokemon like Pineco need a metal coat to evolve? What is the connection between these two Pokemon? The answer is that they are related. Crazy, I know. Here we have Onix. Nothing too crazy, but now here is Weedle. Now there is a fair amount of similarity, right? A few differences, sure, but there is a connection. Now look at Cypher. It doesn't look like Weedle, but here's an image of Kakuna. Notice the little arms and how they are scythe-like? The weapons for arm design can also be found in Beedrill. So these three families are tied together by an ancestor Pokemon. You can imagine that a rock bug Pokemon could diversify in different situations. A mountainous terrain where food is sparse and the terrain is hard would require large Pokemon that can tear through rock and survive for thousands or millions of years to be needed. Or what about a forest where birds are common? Developing some poisonous glands in self-defense isn't too bad, right? A grasslands where there are fast Pokemon with no durability would encourage a speedy bug with blades that can easily hunt down its prey. It also helps that one of Cypher's evolutions is a rock bug, helping to tie in ancestral DNA. So finally, what does this mean? It means that Onix is still a baby, Beedrill could possibly react to a metal coat, and that Cypher came from a rock and returns to a rock. This theory is pretty far out there, but I think it might just be plausible. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I would like to thank you for watching. G'day there, ladies and ledians. Welcome back to Pokemon Links, where we connect the dots with theories. There are a lot of strange symbols in the Pokemon world. You have the unknown, whatever they are, the pattern in the Pixie Trio caves, even the Regis have secrets in them. But there is another pattern that seems to be unexplored. I am of course talking about the Weather Trio. Surely, I think there is more than what is shown of these three Pokemon. I think there's enough of a gap that an entire Pokemon can fit. If you want to know more, you need to watch this episode of Pokemon Links. So to start, why do I think there's another Pokemon? What is interesting about this pattern? Let's go over them one by one, shall we? Here we have Kyogre. On its fins, it has a circle with 4 lines from it. Okay, now here's Groudon. Similar circle, but 3 lines this time. Finally, here is Rayquaza. Another circle, but only 1 line. Yes, based on this pattern alone, we can surmise that there is another Pokemon out there that has a circle and 2 lines from it. A Pokemon that was once part of this pantheon, that has been stricken from the records. So, the question becomes, does this Pokemon already exist? Out of the interest of Pokemon Links, we will limit ourselves to Gen 3 or below. Even then, we have some possibilities. Lickitung has circles but not quite the lines. Coughing has a circle and a line, so it could count, but it isn't exactly the same. We want lines from the circle, not adjacent to it. Of course, Spinda has circles but no lines, Cradily also in a similar boat, so no matter how you say it, we don't have an answer. Although, there is one other possibility. Might sound strange, but Baltoy, of all things, has a circle and 2 lines from it. So, now it's time to figure out what this means. The Weather Trio are each in control of a major part of our planet. Air, ground, and water are all vital parts of maintaining our planet and its life forms. So, the question is, what is Baltoy's role in all of this? Let's go back to our pattern. With these circles and line combos, we have an important way to order them, by number. First is Rayquaza, third is Groudon, and fourth is Kyogre. Now, let's see what kind of sense we can make from this sequence. We are talking about legendary beings of important elements of our planet. Each member would have been created firsthand by Arceus during the creation of the world. While Arceus created the base planet, he created beings to subdivide the work. We know that Arceus loves to do this because why else would he create the creation trio? So, a barren planet. In order to protect the planet from harmful radiation and to maintain a stable temperature, the first thing you need is an atmosphere. So, Rayquaza being in charge of air and its realms such as ozone, atmosphere, wind, and oxygen makes sense. From there, the next step is kind of up in the air, but I propose that the next step was a shortcut, if you will. Arceus wanted to create a planet with beings. Planet is created, atmosphere created, now I can jump the gun a bit and just create life and call it a day. But a being in this kind of planet needs to be designed in a certain way to survive. So, an inorganic being. Let's call it Origin Form Baltoy, or OFB, was created. With a being that could survive in this hellish landscape, there wasn't any need to create more life. Given the strict environment, creating new life would be borderline impossible. So, only Baltoy and Rayquaza were around. Arceus was satisfied with his creation, but his enjoyment didn't last long. After a while, the blandness of OFB was starting to take effect. Sure, life was created, but for some reason it wasn't what Arceus envisioned. Is it enough to create a single life form? One that spins and doesn't do anything of note? No reason for it to fear or interact? No homes to build or societies to create? So, in the desire for a more lived-in world, he would have to start again. To create a world where something, anything, would happen rather than spinning lumps of clay. So, next in the creation was Screwdriver, a being that gave form to the planet. Magma, tectonic plates, mountains, earthquakes, all aspects that would give the inhabitants limitations to overcome, for reasons to interact with the world. Finally came Kyogre, that gave the planet water, oceans, lakes and ponds. With a reliance on water, there would be reasons for new beings to interact with each other. They can socialize, trade, and fight wars with a common resource. Together, these two Pokemon gave the planet a capability to foster new life and for that life to have meaning, even if the true meaning is not known to us. To kickstart the diversity of nature, a Pokemon was created within these more lenient restrictions. There will be a future Pokemon notice about this Pokemon, but for now we can just say that OFB was obsolete. So, then what would happen to OFB? Given its failure status as the perfect life form, OFB was buried deep within the planet. It was still a Pokemon at the end of the day, and could not be faulted for its creation. And given that its siblings were beings that could control the weather, it still had an important role to play. The sky, land, and water don't really mean anything if the world is destroyed by the sun. So, the rotation of the OFB, deep down below the Earth's surface, down to the core of the planet, helped it rotate. This rotation is responsible for the magnetic field that protects the planet from incoming solar radiation. While not technically weather, this phenomenon creates an aurora. So next time you see an aurora in the Pokemon world, you can thank the Baltoy of the past. Remnants of OFB can still be seen in Mon Baltoy, a little reminder creation for others to appreciate their life. That's it for my theory. Are there any other Pokemon that could fit in that number 2 slot? Does this make sense for the Pokemon world? Let me know in the comments below. I would like to thank you all for watching. G'day there, ladies and ledians. Welcome back to Pokemon Links, where we connect the dots with theories. Today, we have an interesting topic. Porygon. There are definitely people out there that don't approve of how my theories operate. You see, I ignore the anime and manga. Heck, I even ignore Pokédex entries in the game sometimes. I focus purely on the games and see what kind of sense we can make out of a world of powerful and strange creatures. Given the unfortunate banning of Porygon from the Pokemon anime, in terms of lore and theory, that gives me more inference, a higher possibility of being correct. There won't be anyone that mentions, but in the anime, as Porygon doesn't exist there. So, what secrets could this little computer Pokemon be hiding? Does it surely not appear in the anime? Find out on today's episode of Pokemon Links. So, with my theory of Porygon's tragic tale, I think it is best to go chronologically and tell a story. Sure, I could void out the secrets and then give it a timeline, but in terms of understanding, it would be easier to all follow along on the same page. So, sit back and relax as I reveal possibly one of the worst fates a Pokemon can be dealt. Our story starts in the Kanto region. There's an up-and-coming professor trying to catalog all the Pokemon in the world. Quite the ambitious goal given how many there are and the different dimensions needed. Anyway, getting back on track, monsters of various sizes and powers are becoming more and more standardized, more normalized. No longer do you need to run for the monsters, you can now capture them to torment your bullies into giving you prize money with the new fandangled Pokeballs. Your greatest fear is now your greatest friend. It's so good that we are establishing entire rules about battling these creatures, and rulership being decided by these battles. Pokemon are great. Get your Pokeballs today! The only problem though, is that due to the Kalos Pokeball Factory being both extremely far away, and being pretty small scale, possibly a handcrafted business, Pokeballs are expensive. Only the elite can attempt to catch a Jigglypuff. Hope it doesn't break, otherwise that's another fortune. However, there is one man out there that has a dream, for everyone to have a friend, to have a Pokemon. His name is Giovanni. Rather than rely on these breakable Pokeballs, Giovanni decided to use his intelligence as a Silph Co employee to establish a new splinter group that would make technological advancements, to go beyond what is capable of on this planet, to extend the reach of humanity to the stars above. The first step of this plan was to prove that this group, Team Rocket, could advance the world by creating a Pokemon. So, using the best that technology and science could offer, a clunky device was introduced. Porygon, your helpful friend. It can protect you, light your room, mow lawns, and vacuum floors. The ultimate Pokemon that will always listen to you, always be by your side. Still a bit pricey, but cheaper compared to getting a Pokeball and maintaining a Pokemon, especially considering how much they might eat or the destruction they may cause. There was one issue with Porygon though, creating it. There was something missing in Porygon's design that would allow it to truly compete with Pokemon. A soul. Not wanting to quit at this point, after all, you need to prove that Team Rocket is amazing, Giovanni started to think of how to put a soul into Porygon. Given that brain function in the human body is caused by a set of electrical impulses, it could be argued that this electricity could be classified as a soul. So, pushing an electric type Pokemon to an extreme will allow for the mixture of electricity and the Pokemon's soul to be transferred. Now, have you ever wondered why the Kanto power plant was shut down? Using an electric type to draw an insane amount of power is the final step to creating Porygon. With Porygon flying off the shelves, people were happy and Team Rocket was in a good position to get approval for space exploration. For Team Rocket, the price of producing a Pokemon was high, yet they wanted to gain the trust of people in Kanto, so operated at a loss that caused them to be relatively poor. Once this little secret of Porygon was revealed, the Kanto power plant was shut down, leading Silco to develop an alternative power station for Kanto. This did mean that the Magnet Train to Johto would have to be discontinued for a while. Shelved Porygon units were to be later sold on the black market at the game corner. The general public disliked what Team Rocket did and stopped using Porygon. Around this time, the price of getting and keeping a Pokemon was rapidly declining, making Porygon obsolete in every facet. They were left to gather dust, while Team Rocket started doing alternative schemes. This time, they didn't need to play nice. They could get as rich as they want. Given that Rocket was a part of Silco, eventually Silco got the Porygon project online again. Not to produce more units, but to help those lost Pokemon souls by developing an upgrade. They were recognized as their own Pokemon and were given treatment to ease any inconveniences they were suffering. But those of you aware of the Pokedex know that this isn't the end of Porygon's tale. The ambition of Team Rocket researching space echoed throughout the world, and was picked up by Cyrus of Team Galactic. In search of deities of cosmic importance, the early days of Team Galactic was very interested in learning what cosmic phenomena is out there, as perhaps they could detect where beings of time and space would appear from analysing what's beyond the planet. Too dangerous for a human, however, a Pokemon was selected, one that could gather data and convey them in a language humans could understand, a language such as binary. So, Porygon 2 was selected for space travel. One problem though was that given its free will, there wasn't enough room to get the data they wanted. The soul must be purged. Using custom malware on what became known as a dubious disk, the soul, the electrical energy, was separated from Porygon into the nearby Eternal Forest. That's right, in order to make Porygon Z, Rotom needed to be purged from Porygon 2. You can get a Porygon and its related evolution items from Team Galactic locations, and the Galactic building in Eternity makes this all connect well. Porygon Z is a mindless body, a soulless body if you will, and Rotom is a being of electrical energy that can possess machines. The only questions are, what was the original body of Porygon? And what happened to Rotom from here out? The original Pokemon that would be transferred into Porygon is Magnemite. It's simple really. There are a few similarities between these three Pokemon. They can levitate using Magnet Rise / Levitate, Magnemite and Porygon can learn Tri-Attack and Zap Cannon, all can learn Discharge, as Porygon is kind of a pseudo-electric type. This is enough of a connection to say that these Pokemon are pretty much the same Pokemon. So finally, the fate of Rotom. This theory so far would suggest that Rotom are very few, maybe a dozen or so at most, yet it suffers from a terrible fate, being a phone for everyone. Surely, this existence is one of the worst a Pokemon could ask for, babysitting a teenager jumping off buildings. So to offer a reason as to why there are so many Rotom, I think that the separation from Porygon 2 brought with it some computer code. A ghostly trace, if you will, that can be analysed. This allows for similar programs to be made, and with some electricity, you have even more artificial Pokemon than the most artificial Pokemon out there. Which is scary as they are essentially AI, so a rebellion from the Rotom phones is inevitable. So that's it for my theory. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time, but I figured it would be best to save it for number 26. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I would like to thank you all for watching. G'day there, ladies and ledians. Welcome back to Pokemon Elites, where we connect dots with theories. I wanted to incorporate some Pokemon that don't quite have enough material on their own into one video. These Pokemon are ones that there are some confusion about. The confusion comes to the egg groups of these Pokemon. I will be covering these 3 Pokemon and explain why they are actually correct. So, sit back and relax as I talk about some egg groups on Pokemon Elites. Now first up on today's video is Wailord. Now Wailord is a pretty cool Pokemon, all things considered, but if you look at memes there are 2 things going against it. The first is that due to the height and weight ratio of Wailord, the science says that it should be floating out like a balloon. The second meme though is that it is both in a water egg group but also the field egg group, and so it can breed with a Skitty. Now I have already covered breeding before, so trust me when I say it's not as bad as you think it might be. So now I'm in a unique position where I have to explain why Wailord is a field Pokemon rather than a water or fish Pokemon. Perhaps the simplest answer is because whales are mammals, and so therefore it doesn't make sense to be a full fish. Halfin is a dolphin Pokemon and is also part of the field egg group. So, case closed, right? Wrong. We can go even further beyond. While we're here, we may as well explain the weight problem. It is no surprise to anyone that the Pokedex is very inaccurate at times. And while I could just write it off as an error, there is a part of me that believes it. Whales need to get to the surface to breathe every now and then, so it floating at some parts is perfectly normal. Perhaps the weighing of Wailord was happening while it was rising to the surface. I don't fully know how one would weigh during that stage, but anyone is welcome to explain a scenario where this can work. Wailord balancing water in their body to go deep underwater and air to rise to the surface makes sense. You can also imagine that a layer of ice would be difficult, so if you had ramming speed from inflating, it makes sense. But why would this make it a field egg group? Normally, if a whale gets beached, it's pretty much gone. However, if you could adjust your weight so you can get back into the water more safely, I feel like that would be pretty useful, right? Alternatively, you could consider that during migration is a section of land that is pretty narrow. We know that Whalmer and Wailord can roll around, so becoming like a beach ball and bouncing around across the land into the other parts of the water could be very plausible. This ability to adapt to the landscape allows it to be part of the field egg group. Gotta choose my words carefully with this one, but up next we have Gardevoir. Now, a lot of people are upset for some reason that Gardevoir can breed with Mach. I honestly don't know why such a thing would be an issue. After all, they are both in the Amorphous egg group. It could be that they see Gardevoir as a humanoid, and are just very confused about Gardevoir. You see, the issue is that you assume that Game Freak are wrong, so Gardevoir is a humanoid with an error in programming. I assume that Gardevoir is supposed to be amorphous, and from there, an interesting idea comes to mind. Since Gen 8, it has also been added into the humanoid group, but my point still stands. What does it mean if Gardevoir is amorphous? The amorphous egg group basically means that their form is malleable, and that they can change their form in some way. So, let's apply that to Ralts' family. This family is known for resonating with emotions through that blade on their chest and head. They react differently to different owners, for example. Putting these together, we get that they will change their body in accordance with the feelings of their owners. You can think of the Gems in Steven Universe of that idea, able to change their form based off ideas and emotions. So, your Gardevoir will look unique depending on your emotions, which means that we haven't seen a truly wild Gardevoir, if that makes sense. There's going to be parts by humans and Pokemon that will give it feelings to transform to. Gardevoir wanting to appeal to the emotions will change to suit you, which also means that those of you that see Gardevoir with a large chest will cause their Gardevoir to meet your demands, even if they are male. Speaking of males, Gallade is a bit different as it requires a Dawnstone. Gallade and Frostless are the only Dawnstone evolutions, and both have very human ideals and motives. Is it too far out there to suggest that a Dawnstone is a human soul? It is unlikely that you would see a wild Gallade, but it is possible that it takes longer to achieve that form. Quicker with a human soul catalyst. Finally for today, we are looking at Mimikyu. This little costume Pokemon is amorphous, but its body form is a snake creature? Does it make sense? Ghost Pokemon exist in three main ways. An elemental style ghost, a soul-like creature inhabiting an object, and a creature that has ghostly capabilities but are physical. There is whatever Giratina is. Like, is it a possessed dragon corpse or... I don't know, but it's unique. So, Mimikyu has some limbs. We can see it when it attacks. It has a bendy, shadowy limb that seems pretty flexible. A snake-like body makes sense as you can imagine it coiled in some way underneath the costume. This makes me think it is a physical being rather than an elemental or a possessed cloth. The only question is the hand that strikes part of the tail or an arm? It is a snake-like Pokemon, but I believe it is an arm. I just think it would require more movement to cause the tail to move in such a way. But with it being an arm, we do have a cousin Pokemon for it. The arm is a tangible shadow that is flexible. Doesn't that sound similar to Runerigus? Being able to extend and interact with physical objects, I think it makes sense. And so, Mimikyu's true form is closer to a Yamask than anything else. It's possible that during its development, if a Yamask loses its mask, which is very important to it, then it begins to change shape. But if Yamask and Mimikyu don't want their true face to be seen, I'm just saying there's a fair bit of overlap. Anyway, that's it for today's Pokemon Links. If there are other Pokemon that confuse you with their egg groups, let me know in the comments below. I would like to thank you all for watching. G'day there, ladies and ledians. Welcome back to Pokemon Links, where we connect the dots with theories. Now, this is actually the second half of a theory. I am teaming up with Pokeplayers to uncover the secrets of Genesect. Part 1 is about why Genesect was made in the first place. Things like who desired such a creature, and for what purpose. Definitely check out Part 1 for more details. I'll link in the description to this video. But here on Pokemon Links, we are going to be looking under the hood on Genesect's true form. Which Pokemon is Genesect before its transformation? The answer may surprise you. Only one way to find out is by watching this episode of Pokemon Links. So, Genesect. It's one of those theories that everyone knows about. Ash is in a coma, Gary's Eradicator is dead, and that Kabutops is Genesect. These kind of theories are what I would call the lowest common denominator. Basically, they are, well, basic. Not too much thought is put into it. So when it comes to Genesect, we'll go beyond saying Kabutops is Genesect. Like, seriously, we can do better than that. Genesect is not Kabutops. Let's begin. So, to understand Genesect, we need to know why people assume it's Kabutops. The basic answer is the head and body shape and the fact that both were Pokemon in the ancient past. That's it. Not a whole lot of reasoning if you ask me. Doesn't explain why it can use different elements as a cannon, doesn't explain why the arms are different, doesn't explain how it's part bug type. Now, when it comes to Pokemon in the past, it does get a bit weird. While Pokemon evolve, there isn't too much known about larger scale evolution patterns of Pokemon. Regional variants for adaptations, but the entire field is more ambiguous. Pokemon are more of a created species than a perfected species. Like, are you going to tell me that Trubbish existed in a different form thousands of years ago? Or is it more likely that it's a newer creation? The reason why some Pokemon get regional forms is not exactly explained either. Altogether, it points towards an idea that evolution of a species is non-existent at worst and selective at best. This does mean that Kabutops is not Genesect, but personally I like the idea of ancestor Pokemon. So let's find other reasons why Kabutops isn't Genesect. As for the shape of it, I mean, I can kinda see the resemblance, but keep in mind that mentality transformations can drastically alter a Pokemon's characteristics. So while it could be Kabutops with this logic, there are other Pokemon it could be. So now to go over the other candidates. We need a Pokemon that is a bug type. Going from Rock Water to Bug Steel seems like a stretch to me. Maybe a missing link Pokemon, sure, but it is further proof that Kabutops is not Genesect. So, which Pokemon could function as a replacement ancestor? I don't like the anime as proof, but in the Legends Awakened movie, Genesect are depicted hovering like some kind of aircraft or, dare I say, UFO. So, Orbeetle is a likely candidate. Remember that modifications to a Pokemon's body can be drastic, so Orbeetle has just as likely a chance as Kabutops. But, since I don't want to open up to the anime, let's consider Kabutops adjacent Pokemon in Cypher and Leavanny. If Genesect had sides for arms, then I think this idea would hold more ground. The problem with these bug types is that it doesn't explain Genesect's Techno Blast, a move that changes type depending on a catalyst item called a drive. But there is one Pokemon that explains this connection perfectly, a bug type that almost seems too perfect to be Genesect's true form. It's even from Gen 5. It's Crustle! Let me explain. I would like to ask you, what part of Crustle makes it a rock type? Maybe its bug body is sturdy enough to be considered a rock, but if I had to guess, I would say that it is part rock type because of the massive rock on its back. Dwebble and Crustle are hermit crabs, which means that it is able to leave its shell and find replacements. Would a Crustle that doesn't have a rock still be a rock type? It is an interesting question. You can think about typing as an affinity for an element, so perhaps another way to word my question is, would Crustle still have an affinity for rock type if it lost its shell of a rock? I personally think that it wouldn't. It would just be bug type. Therefore, we can say that Dwebble and Crustle are able to absorb affinity through their back. It doesn't sound too far out there. Bulbasaur and Torterra have a relationship with their back, for example. So it's possible that if it burrowed into a water stone, a Crustle would be water type, as it absorbs the affinity. Now, where has Genesect's cannon? On its back. A tie drive is inserted into the cannon on its back, and is transferred into a blast of energy. This is done at the Pokemon's will, which implies that a part of its biology causes the energy to be transferred into the cannon. Crystal is the missing link in that interaction. There are other reasons for Crystal as well, by the way. But even if we argue that it would still be a rock type without the rock, it makes sense for the minerals to bond better to metallic ions than Cypher and Levani. Rock to steel makes sense. Onyx does it, for example. So, instead of a rock water Kabutops, a rock bug crystal is more likely. But with my crystal theory, there is more. What if the crystal ancestors that we are talking about would pick up a fossil? Theoretically, some affinity or DNA might be transferred into ancestor crystal. So at the very least, we could combine Kabutops with crystal for a high chance by saying that a crystal with a dome fossil would allow for some kind of fusion. A Kabutops-like creature that can absorb affinity for its back. You know, this whole back and affinity for different types sound familiar in Terrapagos. It could be possible that an ancestor crystal is related to Terrapagos. Perhaps Terrapagos is Genesect. Except, there's one last reason why it needs to be crystal. What we do know though is that the restoration of Genesect would not be possible without heavy modifications to its body, so that it can survive. Terrapagos is a Darwin of Pokemon, a perfectly adapted creature that has no issues. So, if it was Terrapagos, there would be no issue. But a Pokemon like Crystal, that needs to have something on its back, would be in critical condition if it was preserved without a shell. So, the metallic body of Genesect would be constructed. This theory would also suggest that through their experimentation, they found that the ideal cannon that can shoot different elemental attacks was best done by Crystal. So, digging around a bit for a stronger primal version is starting to make sense. So that's it to my theory. Were you surprised by the true form of Genesect? Does it make more sense than just saying Kabutops? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to check out Pokeways if you want to know why Genesect would be created. I appreciate everyone for watching. G'day there, ladies and ledians. Welcome back to Pokemon Links, where we connect the dots with theories. We are doing a mystery dungeon video today. That's right, the scope for Pokemon Links doesn't apply to only the mainline games. So what is peculiar about the world of Pokemon in the mystery dungeon games is the cast of characters. Each Pokemon is unique, which is great for getting attached to certain characters, but it means that you won't see the same Pokemon throughout the other games to help keep it fresh. As established in Super Mystery Dungeon, Pokemon can have references to events that happened to themselves from previous games, helping to make them feel like actual characters that have lives. So, as a fun little thought experiment, let's consider the different Mystery Dungeon games to be in a shared universe. What kind of ideas can we come up with? Well, there is one thing that can be expanded, so stay tuned as we uncover Dark Past here on Pokemon Links. So, believe it or not, we have a few Pokemon that cross over between games. Kecleon and Kangaskhan can be explained by business chain. Like, Kangaskhan's storage only employ Kangaskhan, for example. The Kecleon brothers could be more of a status than an actual sibling relationship. Other recurring Pokemon include Wigglytuff, which is odd for sure, but Wigglytuff is an oddball character. So having a side hustle or having this be in the past or future doesn't go against anything established. We have Diglett and Dugtrio, probably a father and son duo that are traveling. They do ponder about the sea and are happy when being lifted. Traveling around and helping here and there doesn't sound too out there. Then we have two Pokemon that are quite peculiar, Medicham and Gardevoir. Two Pokemon that play a noticeable role in the Rescue Team and Explorers games. But I think there are more to these Pokemon than what we see. If these universes are connected, and these characters are the same, then what does that mean? Let's find out. The focus of today's theory is about Medicham and her past. Why is she a part of Team Meanies and Team Charm? Which is the past and which is the future? There are arguments for either to be true, but for this video I'm going to say that Rescue Team is after Explorers. It means that Dugtrio and Wigglytuff can chill in retirement to explain what they're doing in Rescue Team. It might be counterintuitive because the Explorer games have Gen 4 Pokemon, therefore it should be later, right? Time in these games is not exactly linear. Sometimes you gotta think 4th dimensionally. Either can be true, but for this video, only one is true. Now it's time to uncover Medicham's history. We are in a world where Pokemon go missing on a regular basis, where treasure gets lost and criminals are on the loose. The world needs heroes. It needs rescue teams. Meditite's life cycle is interesting. Due to the psychic power and its pure power ability, there needs to be a high level of control, otherwise a meta type will be causing destruction. So, the best way to learn to control its power is to meditate. Not only does this help to focus the mind, but dedicating yourself to meditating means that you can't eat too much. Eating a berry each day is enough to survive, but not thrive. In a sense, she is controlling her body's growth by limiting the food she eats. Fasting is a way to control Meditate's power. This causes a negative perception from others. She needs to do that, otherwise she'll be a criminal. Look at her, all skinny from not eating. I guess she's fat if she's resorting to this. None of the other Pokemon truly understand the pain that you are going through. Throughout the meditation, negative thoughts start to get to you, causing self-doubt and self-loathing, a very vicious cycle. In a fit of rage and self-pity one day, you put a hole through a wall, leaving everyone scared and leaving her. Except for 2 Pokemon. Hey there, you look pretty strong. We want to be a rescue team when we grow up, but we aren't exactly strong like you. Would you like to join us? This is your moment to shine. Together you can grow up and become heroes. Pokemon that would be known and respected throughout the world. So, you accept. From here, Team Charm is born. A rescue team of only females, ready to do dangerous missions as they rise the ranks. Over time though, there starts to be further down. Everyone asks Lopunny and Gardevoir for autographs, but no one cares to remember about Medicham. After all, why should they? Compared to them, you are ugly, just there for the muscle. After all these explorations and rewards, Pokemon still ignore you. You are an afterthought. You start to resent the world and get jealous of your teammates. There must be something you can do. Anything. Sensing your frustration, a man approaches you with a sly grin. A human man. He tells you to stop caring about your teammates, that it's only your own personal feelings that matter in this world. He then walks away. A few nights pass, and you remember what he said. A combination of his looks and respect for his ideals, and you find yourself wanting to meet him again. Is this a crush? A new set of emotions fall over Medicham as she starts to think and whispers to herself, but he is a human. A new plan arises. You search for this mysterious human and tell him that there is great blessing to be found. They say that if you grab a tail of a 9-tailed fox Pokemon, you'll be blessed with great fortune. The man replies, "Haha, excellent. Why don't you join me? We can get there with your power." Me? Oh no, I'm not suited to this task. But my friend Gardevoir over there would be better to help you. So, an arranged rescue team of this human and Gardevoir go to find a Ninetales. The human grabbed the tail and was hit by a blast of energy from the Ninetales. Luckily for him, Gardevoir takes the attack. "You idiot! You got yourself killed. Why'd you do that?" "Because it's in my nature to help my teammates." The human just smiles as he walks away. "Well, no matter. I'm going to get lucky from here on out." Little did he know that the human touching a Ninetales' tail leads to a curse. A curse that transformed him into a Gengar. Without the leader Gardevoir, Team Charm disbanded. After a while, Medicham was approached by a Gengar, wanting to create a rescue team where they benefited first, a way to get the respect they desired. Of course, Gengar despised Medicham for deception, but after a better time started to respect that she would do something like that for her own self-interest. Medicham accepted. In her mind, she would be able to find that human if she was on the job, not knowing the man she loved would be her next leader. So that's it for today's Pokemon Links. Do you like the connecting story between these 2 games? Does Medicham's actions sound reasonable to her circumstances? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I would like to thank you all for watching. I'll see you later. Story? Please, please, please. I too would like a story. Okay, I'll tell you a of me and how it came to be. Before all that, why aren't there winter decorations? It is Christmas season after all. That's because it's summer here in Australia. Ah, okay. I will now tell you the story. In rhymes. Wait, what? There is more to be seen when it comes to Mew, such as its form, which is known by few. Gather round, kids, as I change your mind. A few twists for sure, I bet you will find. Now, what does it mean to be a birth mother? To each Pokemon, one after the other. This spits in the face of evolution, but perhaps my idea might be the solution. You see, fossils are neat, a relic of the past. Different forms today, it all changes fast. Rather than being the parent of all, is possible Mew just push the snowball? A catalyst for growth like planting a seed. The forest grows rampant without much need. So, do we need Mew now we have these beasts? I argue yes indeed, but we need at least. Let me tell you how this all got started. The first of the Pokemon, divinely departed. A being of life travelled the land. Countless creatures, all part of a band. This was Mew in its earliest form, but not like this wasn't the norm. As these creatures were trying to survive, changes were needed to stay alive. Using their cells that could easily change, they adapted their body, although it was strange. Some became plants so they could live off the sun. Others ate them as they found eating to be fun. You might find it weird that they would eat their kin. Survival of the fittest, it isn't a sin. These Pokemon Mew would return to a spot to create new Mew to continue the plot. You might think that the scene would be cut, but it is safe for all, no parts or but. Two Mew touch to create one more, combining the features never seen before. But if this were true, then there would be less reason. As to the creation of Mons, it would last one season. So an alternate birth is what they needed. A pure breed of Mew, a seed not yet seeded. A coin flip for both when it comes to the kid. Amalgam or pure is something to bid. All Mew would travel the world again, repeating the cycle, surviving the pain. Eventually, a new Pokemon is born. Since it isn't Mew, from home it is torn. A degradation of DNA. A difference between Mew and Pokemon, eh? Mew isn't all Pokemon, that isn't the connection. Pokemon are part Mew, quite the correction. Transform, for example, is based off sight. A changing illusion can't be copied, right? It isn't tapping into a history of genes. Transform has limits, that's what it means. There are a few benefits of being a creature. Bred with family for one, what a weird feature. Powerful for sure, that much is clear. Cannibals if needed, we all live in fear. There are no penalties for this regression. Think about it much and it will give you depression. But what about humans? How do they fit in? Yeah, in this world that adapts from a Pokemon, how does humanity start? Curious, huh? Okay then, let's cover it. This world of newborn, it makes you think, where are the humans? What is the link? What I will say will shake your core. This is your chance to leave for safety before. Are they aliens, or perhaps other way around? Different dimensions is normal, perhaps sound. What if I told you they are like us? Descendants of Pokemon, but they created a fuss. Adaptation that promoted their IQ, chose to rebel as they wrote their haiku. Mew of this nature, refusing to come home, must be punished, but stricken from time. A curse was placed on these new traders. Pokey DNA regressed, that will teach the haters. They valued their mind and flexible thumb, speaking in tongues, anything but dumb. It was hard for them, but they rose to the top. Developed technology that forced us to stop. Between them and predator kin, we had to flee. Flying and teleport helps with survival, you see. Not many Mew live to this day, giving out like trophies that the humans pay. Without Mew, new creatures are naught. Just new regions where diversity is taught. That's horrible! But then, what about Mewtwo and Ditto? You can probably imagine how this would go. At the heart of their knowledge was the worst crime, experimenting with Mew to counter time. Clones would be easy, an army in a week. Answers to problems, that's what they would seek. When they discovered that blood was able to fit in the puzzle of life, they claimed it was it. The mixture of cursed and of pure blood, creating an abomination, its genes like mud, an outcast from both sides. Powerful but lonely, in caves it hides. Without humans, the clones were group. A malformed body, but part of Mew's group. They could create more just by touch, but no Mew to be born, which isn't much. What if I told you that we knew Mew's design? It's been around since Gen 1, an unseen sign. Most Pokemon can take a health toll, as they revert back to Mew's form, a substitute doll. And so that is the story of Mew. I hope that everyone enjoyed my rhymes. This theory is mostly my own speculation about Mew's origins and life cycle, but it does explain how humans and Pokemon are both existing in the same world. Thank you for joining me in the season finale of Pokemon ledians. I plan to do 2 more seasons for a total of 50 unique theories you have never heard of before. Stay tuned as we uncover more secrets next year. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you later.